All right, looks like we are live with another show. It's your boy CFB Season, and tonight we have a special guest named Justin, but he goes by Updog Sports Talk. Man, what's up, man? Welcome in.
Hey, glad to be here. Glad to, talk some ball. It's a little bit, giving everyone a little bit of an off-season break because, college football has probably the longest off-season in sports because of, all of that discourse. But glad to be here and, talk some actual football on the field.
Speaking of the off season, how's your off season been going so far? You know,
It's
are you,
it's been pretty good. I feel like we've grown quite a bit this off-season. I actually can't remember like how many followers we had before the off season started. I know we were like below 1,000. We crossed that threshold now. We're seeing the YouTube grow. It's been a great off season. How about you?
I feel like this is when you hit a lot of your growth. To be honest, is in the off season because a lot of people's not hitting content. A lot of people's not talking a ball, so we kind of having the upper edge a little bit in a way.
Right, right. And we're us independent people. We're covering different topics around the sport, and I think people just kind of get tired about what some of the bigger media networks put out there because they're just talking about the same tired topics over and over again. And of course, that previously mentioned off-season discourse um, off the field that no one really wants to kind of go into.
We try to keep like a good clean agenda. We try to change it up as much as we can, every week. Um, we always try to talk ball though for the most part. I know how some college football accounts they kind of like talking like who you think would win out of these coaches in a fight, or like how they football season talk. That's not kind of us. We kind of like sticking primarily just ball talk for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really refreshing.
Um, yeah. So tell us how you got started and why and like with your account and a little bit of your origin story.
Yeah, so my buddy and I, we both went to Bowling Green. We've been friends. We even before that since high school. We always loved playing NCAA 14. We had a long time dynasty where we would share playing basically. Like one of us would play the first half, one of us would play the second half, and we did this dynasty. Like I kid you not, throughout college. We'd continue this after college. We actually got to the end of the thing, like we completed all 60 seasons and got the little pop-up that says, hey, congratulations, you completed 60 seasons. By the way, it is actually a very weird time because like you start going through your off-season and preseason program, and like you're literally about to go into the season and it just stops you. So that's what it's like at the end of that. I was not expecting to go into that, but anyways, we got kind of, further into, after college life and stuff. And around COVID, I think we really hit the line where we were like, you know what? We're getting a little bit tired about how sports, college football in particular, are being talked about by the mainstream media networks. They're they're only covering the same old teams, in the NFL. They're just sticking to, at the time it was the Patriots, the Cowboys, that kind of stuff, which is fine. You got to talk about them every once in a while, but still, like that is your whole discussion. You're ignoring, at the time, our two teams back here, the Bills and Bengals, are being ignored. College, likewise. I mean, you see it still going on where they only talk about 10 teams. So, we want to talk about each of the sports in their entirety. Talk about all the storylines that are going on for all 32 NFL teams, all 100, I believe it's 36 now, college football teams. There's just so many stories to tell, and we've really found our niche in telling even those smaller stories as well.
Man, that's awesome because we need appreciation across the whole board. I do agree that it's very top heavy with the top programs in the country. And I find it funny because, man, I had a buddy growing up that we did the exact same thing in NCAA 14, where one person would play a first half, was pass the controller for the second half. We did that for a while. We didn't hit all 60 seasons. We didn't get that message to quits like how y'all did, but I find that pretty cool. That's a cool story how I could relate to you in that. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Who was your team?
we kind of like switching it up a little bit. We kind of like we would like picking a little small program and like work our way
Oh
up.
yeah.
I
Oh
find it
yeah.
we always felt like it was more intriguing and fun. And but then again, once you stay with the same team for so long, it gets so boring, I find.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
At that point, you're ready for a new challenge, time to move on to the next team. I know for us, our tradition was we always had to start with the New Mexico State Aggies. That was our team.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, man, let's jump into some of the topics we're gonna talk about tonight. I got them written down right here. All right, this first one right here, Big Noon, just came out with some interesting news. They picked the obviously I think everyone knew they were going to pick it because they had first dibs. They picked the Ohio State versus Texas matchup for their first week. Man, what's your thoughts about Big Noon? A lot of people across the country ain't too high on it. A lot of people don't like the 11 a.m. kicks, but I'm just curious what you think about it.
So, while I was thinking about this question, I kind of thought back to where, we can kind of go dive into a little bit of history here. I think I can trace where Big Noon really began. We throw back to week 2 of 2016. We had the most ridiculous primetime slate of all time. Ohio State versus Oklahoma, Auburn versus Clemson, Georgia, Notre Dame, and then USC and Stanford. All of them were all in the primetime slot, which was just absurd. I think Ohio State and Oklahoma was on ABC. Georgia, Notre Dame on NBC. Fox had USC and Stanford. I believe, I can't remember where Auburn and Clemson was. That may have been ESPN. But USC ran Stanford off the field while the other 3 games were all one-score games. I imagine that Fox's ratings suffered from that. And when they went to this new agreement with the Big Ten, they saw their lesson from that situation. And they decide, you know what, we're going to carve out a new path here with making the noontime slot our big thing. And, so that's what the background is. And I am generally okay with it. Most of the time they pick Ohio State and Michigan. Those are programs that we are typically used to seeing in that noon time slot anyways. Mm-hmm. I know, like before I went to school at Bowling Green, like I grew up an Ohio State fan. And, I was very much used to seeing them at noon. Michigan fans are very much used to seeing their team at noon. Now, for tailgating, everything like that, not a lot of fun, I would imagine. But, that kind of stuff is fine. I think where, Big Noon kind of crosses the line a little bit sometimes is some of these big matchups. And that's where, everyone's frustration comes in. Ohio State, Texas, felt like that one definitely belonged in primetime. I know last year, week 1, honestly, the one that offended me more was seeing West Virginia versus Penn State at noon. Like, that stadium deserved a night game for hosting Penn State. Yeah. West Virginia absolutely deserved a night game for that. And it was disgraceful that was a noon game.
You see, the way I view it is that I'm okay sometimes with the big noon selections. I get it. The Big Ten is kind of a cold weather up there. I mean, this is August, though. But I get it for the most part. They want to play early in the daylight and stuff like that. But this is a top 5 matchup, man. This is a top 5 matchup out the gate. The defending national champions, and you're going to put them at 11 a.m. That's where I kind of draw the line a little bit. And I'm a LSU fan, but I love college football across the board, obviously. But tailgating is critical to our culture, especially in the South. And like, I couldn't imagine like whenever we have 11 a.m. games, it's kind of just like a doozy in the mornings. No one's
right.
Really, you can't really get moving. You can't really get going. It's hard to tailgate. It's hard to link up with people. And it's just like, man, those 11 a.m. kicks are kind of brutal a little bit. But also, I do kind of like it whenever I got a full Saturday to watch football. And it's a pretty intriguing matchup right out the gate, at 11 a.m. And it's like, okay, we could stack our day. We got a good 11 a.m. game. We got a good midday game and then a night game. But I just feel like, man, two top 5 teams preseason, the national champions, Arch, man, just so many storylines. I didn't agree with them being at 11 a.m. kick, but I guess it is what it is, man. Fox, it's all about the money, and they're gonna choose the best available, and that was the best available. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, at least an afternoon game. Like I think Clemson versus LSU, mentioning your LSU Tigers, that game at night does fit. So like, at least we get like kind of spread out here. with some of the marquee games, which is really cool. I like that. I think there's another demographic that they catch, and that's the college football fan that doesn't plan their life around college football. Like they have wedding. Lots of us are in the ban fall weddings movement, but some people aren't. They're going to weddings and stuff, and those noon games. If you have a wedding, like you're gonna get to watch that whole game.
I guess the tailgating culture is not as strong in the North. You kind of live up there. Maybe you might have a better feel on it than what we'd have in the South, but it kind of feels like the Big Ten. Like I guess that's not their main priority, or it might be, but that's just the feeling I'm getting because they like. I mean, it's cold weather up there. They prefer probably playing 11 a.m. kicks.
I think you'll see some around like Ohio State and Michigan, but generally, like you're either at the game or you're watching it at home. Is usually what goes on there.
I got you.
All now right. I will say,
yeah,
I did have a 6 a.m. tailgate once. This was 2023 with Deion Sanders' first home game, Colorado versus Nebraska. That one got selected for Big Noon, 10 a.m. local.
You have to. You want me to tell you something crazy?
Yeah.
LSU. Hey, us at LSU, we started tailgating before the sun's even up, dog.
I love it. I love to hear it.
Crazy. Be crazy with our tailgating. We take that shit really serious, man. We slamming beers before the sun's even up.
Hey, that's how it's got to be. And then you drink the stadium dry.
LSU fans are known to do that too.
Yeah, that's why I love. Sorry, this is off topic. Did not plan to go to this at all, but like that's why I love when like LSU plays like a road game against someone random. Like I don't know why, but like LSU at Syracuse is one that really sticks out. Yeah. Like you're dropping this complete culture mismatch in here. These guys are going to be out tailgating, first thing in the morning. Drinking up your stadium dry. Like it is fantastic.
Yep. All right. So let's jump into our next segment. I got a pretty interesting question, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this one. Who, in your opinion, won the offseason in college football?
I feel like I sometimes I also like to categorize offseason winners into two different categories. There's some winners who generate a lot of hype in the offseason, but they generally don't seem to live up to it in the regular season. And then there's the actual offseason winners, teams that really improve themselves, or, in this case of the transfer portal, like, kind of retain talent. So I'll let you kind of choose here. Which ones do you want me to dive into first? The offseason only winners or the real offseason winners?
I might want to hear maybe just a little bit of both, maybe potentially.
All right. So offseason winners, I really like what Penn State did this offseason. They kind of, in a way, they're following the same script that we saw from Michigan and Ohio State, a very determined senior group of people. Everyone's like, you know what? We're all coming back. We're going to chase this thing and make it happen. Like everyone basically that was a draft prospect, except for, Abdul Carter. Like he was the top non-quarterback in the draft. There's no chance that he could, go back, but everyone else came back. They finally added a receiver in Pena. I feel like that was huge. Texas Tech absolutely killed in the portal. Kept a lot of their top guys. That Red Raiders team is going to be interesting. And then some smaller ones, Southern Miss, they stole a head coach and everybody from the top team in their conference. That's just something you don't see very often. I absolutely love that. And then also Sacramento State, because how much have you heard Sacramento State's name out there before this offseason? And now they've gotten their name everywhere. Then we can go to offseason only. These are going to be two pretty controversial ones here, but I think, the Auburn Tigers are one. They look like they've stacked a lot of talent. Jackson Arnold is someone who has the tools to be a really good quarterback. I just think, he got stuck in a bad situation in Oklahoma. Bad offensive scheme that didn't feel like it knew what it wanted to do. Receivers constantly getting hurt. He needs to build confidence. Is Hugh Freeze really that guy to help him build confidence? Because from what I've seen, the only time that Hugh Freeze really had things working super well for quarterback was Chad Kelly. And of course, Swag Kelly had a pretty brash personality. Him and Freeze worked perfect together because Freeze is an asshole. Kelly's an asshole. Like, sorry for the language there, but it kind of defines the situation. And that's why those two work perfectly. But other than that, like, he throws quarterbacks under the bus all the time. I don't know if that's going to help Arnold. What do you think?
I'm not high on Arnold, to be honest. Some people are like, they might give him a second chance with Auburn, and we're gonna see how he pans out. And I get it with the play calling and the system at Oklahoma. I didn't see too much. He didn't show me too much talent-wise. Now we'll see how he fits in with Hugh Freeze. And I get it. I get it. How you say they a fake all-season winner, because I'm not high on Auburn. I'm not buying into the Auburn hype. Now they might actually go like 9-3 and prove me wrong or something like that. But I'm not buying into Auburn. I get they do got some good receivers, and they had a pretty solid recruiting trail, and they are on the rise. But however, they're going to have to survive this season, I think. They
Right.
open with a tough matchup with Baylor. That's not a gimme, so things might start off a little sour for Auburn. They're going to have to win that Baylor game, I think, and I think the schedule's tough. I'm not buying into Arnold though.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think the schedule's going to be brutal. I mean, maybe they could do some weird stuff again because I think this is the year where they play Georgia and Alabama both at home.
I think
So,
I think they're going to be a tough team at home. I think they may struggle on the road, and we'll see. We'll see. What would be a good year, you think, for them? I mean, obviously, I think 9-3 might be a ceiling, but
yeah,
it'll be a good year for Arnold and with Auburn.
I think with the expectations they're building, they definitely want to win 8 to 9 games this year.
Okay.
And probably, this is where their expectations are sky high. They probably need to pull off a win over Georgia or Alabama in that 8 wins, especially when you consider the road slate at Baylor,
Fan
at
base,
Texas A&M,
Auburn fan
at
base.
oh
Yeah,
yeah.
they're gonna have to pull out one of those, I think. That's tough though. You did mention some pretty key things right here. I agree with Penn State. Penn State selling in. They my preseason #1 team. Some people don't like that, but I just feel like all what they're returning, and you didn't mention Jim Knowles as well. They stole
Yeah.
the defensive coordinator from Ohio State, really #1 defensive coordinator in the country. So I think Penn State really won the offseason. Texas Tech, you said? Texas Tech hit the portal hard. How you feel? Let me ask you this question: how do you feel about a team who brings in like 20+ transfers? Do you feel like that's maybe something wrong with the culture? Maybe it can work out. Are you a fan of like whenever a team brings in 20+ portal additions?
I think there sometimes can be a ceiling to that team. That they haven't really built a culture. They're kind of just gathering players, and you'll end up seeing them kind of falter throughout the year. We saw that a lot with Ole Miss, for example, last year. They managed to pull off some big wins, but when they needed to get themselves out of a tough situation, they just couldn't do it, and they managed to drop some pretty awful games. So, I think you have to be really strategic about the portal. You can use it, you can get in there, you need a star receiver, go in there and get yourself a star receiver. You're not like in the quarterbacks there homegrown, maybe go get yourself a quarterback, get yourself a defensive lineman. But when you're trying to shape the whole roster by transfers, I think I do agree that you get yourself in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, yeah. So all right, the off-season talk. Let's jump into this next segment. This next segment is pretty juicy right here. I'm gonna present it on the screen for us. I had tweeted it out not too long ago, but this graphic right here, you see it?
Yep.
It says how many of these teams will return to the college football playoff this season. So basically, out of all the teams that made it last year, who's going back to back? And I'm curious to see who are you picking or who are you leaning?
So I have a few different lists here. So I'll kind of go through each list and let you react accordingly. I have on the locks list. So I believe these teams are absolutely going to make it. I am for sure putting money down on them to make it. Georgia, Clemson, Penn State, Ohio State, and Texas.
Okay. Okay. All right. It's juicy already. I like it. Okay.
Do you? Hey, I don't know. You seem to react there. Do you agree or disagree with any of those?
Okay. Hold on. Let me write them. All right. You said Georgia. Say them again.
Clemson,
Clemson.
Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, Penn State, and Texas.
Okay. Georgia. I'm slightly disagreeing. Now
Ooh,
now here's the thing. They can't prove me wrong, obviously, because of Kirby and the way they recruit and the talent. I think talent wise, they probably got talent at every position. My question marks are quarterback play, obviously, with Gunnar Stockton. I don't know what to expect from Georgia with him. He might hit, he might miss. So I think QB play may hold him back slightly for a couple games. And obviously, will the receivers pan out like how we all expecting? You know, they picked up Zakira Branch, Z Branch from USC. You know, they picked up a couple key players, Noah Thomas from A&M, but just how that passing game is going to look and how the old line is going to look. I think defensively they're going to be fine, but I don't think Georgia makes the playoffs this year in my prediction as of now.
oh, I
Yeah,
love it. I love the
yeah.
take.
I got
Yeah,
Clemson.
that off.
Okay, I got Clemson.
You're right though.
I got Clemson making the
Um,
play. I got Clemson making the playoffs. I agree with you that. Um, Penn State, I got making the playoffs. All right, here's another juicy one. You ready? I don't got Ohio
all right.
State making. I don't got Ohio State making it this year.
Ooh,
No champs. It's juicy. It's juicy. I know. Hear me out. I think. Talent wise, they still got a great roster. They got a new quarterback as well, Julian Sayin, really highly touted 5-star quarterback. Everyone's kind of high on him. I'm skeptical. I think he's going to be great, but I got to see it first a little bit. And also, I think the new coordinators, I don't know how they're going to gel with those two new coordinators. It doesn't strike me as really great fits with Patricia and the great wide receiver coach that took the offensive coordinator. I can't forget. I keep forgetting his name.
Heartline.
Hartline, yeah, Hartline. I'm questioning that the play calling and the gelling with this roster. That's what strikes me. I think they may go like 9-3. They lost
Patricia.
Patricia on the defensive side, NFL guy. I don't. He might pan out. I don't know. I'm not
That's
buying
an
it.
underrated storyline. Like I feel like that hire kind of like made set Twitter ablaze for like 2 days, and no one's talked about it since.
Yeah. So I question the new coordinators on both sides trying to gel with this still talented roster. You know, they got Caleb Downs, Jeremiah Smith, Julian Saint. I don't know how their run game's going to look. They did pick up the running back from West Virginia, CJ Donaldson. So I don't know how the run game's going to look, and I don't know. I question them slightly. I think they take a slight step back after the national championship year. So I got them missing, which is kind of juicy because it is the Ohio State Buckeyes. And let's see who else did I go over all your teams?
We had Texas left on the list.
Yeah, and I got Texas making it too. So I got Texas, Clemson, and Penn State making it, and Georgia and Ohio State not. But obviously they could prove me wrong because they still got very talented rosters.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. One of us is gonna have a cold take on this one because I called them my locks. I
Yep.
like it though. Getting bold this offseason.
Now you had some more to say about it.
Yeah, so my next category here is likely to make it. I'm thinking, most likely the Oregon Ducks and Notre Dame make it. The one thing that holds me back for both of them is their schedule is kind of tough.
Okay, Oregon and Notre Dame. Notre Dame's a lot for me, 100%. I got Notre Dame going. Oregon, I got Oregon going 10-2 this year, and I think 10-2 would get you in. So, but I don't feel overly confident as much as I do as Notre Dame compared with those two teams. Now, Oregon could possibly slip up a couple extra game or two. They may go 9-3, maybe 8-4, but I think I agree. I see them as likely. I got them going 10-2, and with potentially maybe a slip up. But Notre Dame, I got it as overly likely. I think Notre Dame's a lot. You have a third category?
Yeah, and then this is kind of like a bill category. Like Arizona State, I kind of just had to put in their own because they're top 5 in returning production, but they're in the Big 12, and the Big 12 is like 7 teams in the top 25 in returning production. That's absurd. There's actually going to be tough competition in that conference, and then
The-
Boise State has a decent chance as well.
yeah, I think Boise State has a really good chance again because of their conference and it's weak, and I don't know how UNLV's looking. I think with they got a new head coach with Dan Mullen, and you know I don't see anyone else in that conference kind of challenging them. It's kind of a weaker conference. Arizona State, you're right though about the Big 12. I would probably say Arizona State doesn't make it again, just because of the Big 12 so deep and loaded.
Yeah, and they have the target on their backs now.
They got the target on their backs. It's just like I don't know who to pick from the Big 12, man. The Big 12 is going to be so fun to keep up with this year. So yeah,
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
okay. Tennessee, I don't think returns after losing Nico. Indiana, I got them going at least 9-3. SMU, I don't know about SMU this year. How you feel about SMU?
Yeah. So a little bit of a hint on our next segment, but I like Kevin Jennings being back for them. They have a lot of talent. Schedule is a little bit tougher. They play both Baylor and TCU in the non-conference. That's gonna be big. But I see all three of those on the outside. And I don't think any of those three are going to be bad. Tennessee has a pretty decent schedule. They just they made it 9-3 or 8-4. That'll put them kind of top 20, but not quite in the top 12 to make it. And kind of likewise for Indiana and SMU. I just see all three of them just barely on the outside.
Yeah, I had Tennessee as my preseason number 13 team with Nico, and once they lost Nico, I kind of dropped them into the 20s preseason rank. So I don't know how I feel about the new quarterback from they just traded quarterbacks. It was funny how that worked out. But I don't know. I don't know. The new quarterback kind of concerns me a little bit now. People were concerned with Nico. Now I feel like they got. I don't know. We'll see how he looks. So
yeah,
I'm making a final thought. I don't think SMU returns. Yeah.
I agree with that.
Now,
Yeah.
you listed 5 locks. Now, is there anyone that's not in this graphic that you have a lock on?
Alabama.
Alabama. Okay. All right. That's a good one too. Alabama's very talented.
Yeah. And I don't think we're talking about Michigan in this race enough because, they kind of, they had their passing game was absolutely dreadful. Make no mistake. They got themselves a quarterback now. And the other key is, you look at their schedule got a lot easier. They don't have Oregon on there anymore. I don't believe they play Penn State again. They just have, Ohio State at home, Oklahoma on the road. And, after Oklahoma, I think Nebraska might be their toughest test.
Michigan football schedule. So they open up with New Mexico. And then let's see. Watch, I'll share it. All right, open up with New Mexico. This is a pretty interesting, intriguing week 2 game right here. Michigan at Oklahoma. I think it's a winnable game. I'm not overly high on both programs, but I do think both teams are trending slightly in the right way. What you think about this? What you think about this week?
That's a game that's going to tell us a lot about both teams. They both made moves this offseason, but what are they really? That game's going to tell us.
I'm leaning Michigan in that game. So that would be 2-0, 3-0. This is an interesting game right here. Week 4 at Nebraska.
Yeah, no Sherrone Moore in that game. He's taking the suspension for that one. So that one's a little bit interesting. I'm probably inclined to go Michigan in that one.
So that would be 4-0. I think they beat Wisconsin. That'll be 5-0. On the road at USC, it's hard for me to get a true feel on USC this year. I don't know what to expect from USC.
Yeah, USC is another one of those teams that kind of, I probably could have put them in that category earlier. One of those teams that kind of generated some noise this offseason. I don't really know where it's coming from. I'm not fully optimistic they've improved completely. I think Michigan can win that one.
That would be undefeated. I think they could beat Washington.
Look at the last 4.
Purdue,
those four.
Northwestern, Maryland.
It gets
Yeah,
ugly.
I think
And
these.
I
I
mean,
think these two road games right here. Well, I guess these three, the Oklahoma, the Nebraska, and USC probably are going to be, besides Ohio State, I would say. I don't know. Michigan State, I think they still probably a ways away.
right.
It is a rivalry game. You never know with those, but you're right though. The schedule ain't that bad. You know, they don't get
Yeah,
Penn
and you
State.
have Ohio State missing the college football playoffs, so I would imagine that path would include losing to Michigan there at the end.
I do have Michigan beating Ohio State. You want to hear Bo Tate?
All right.
We are projecting Bryce Underwood to be the starter, right?
Yeah.
As a freshman.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, here's a bold take. Bryce Underwood leads Michigan to a 10-win season in his freshman campaign.
Yeah, I mean, look at the schedule. I can absolutely see it.
Yep.
If I could see that on whatever betting app I want to use, like I would take it right now.
Anyone in the comments, man? Anyone watch? We got a few people in the lobby watching our show, man. What y'all think about that, Bo Tate? Am I crazy, or y'all can see it happening, or what? Let us know. But so yeah, Michigan, man. They have. I mean, they had a nasty defense last year. I know they lost a little bit on their D line. So we're gonna have to see how their D line's looking. But I just feel like, man, they were winning games without even hitting 70 passing yards last year.
Right. Like
Bro.
they weren't passing well against Arkansas State. They were, and they still were winning games, and at the end of the year, especially, beating Ohio State and Alabama.
Right. And I forgot who they hired as their offensive coordinator. I think Chip Lindsey, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I'm not overly high on that hire. I felt like at Michigan they could have had a better hire for our OC. We're going to see how he and Bryce Underwood looks. That's one thing. That's a big storyline for the season, how Chip Lindsey neutralizes Bryce Underwood. But I feel like the schedule, like now reconfirming what you said, that the schedule's manageable, and I think even with a freshman inexperience, you could scrape by some those just those tough little road games. You're gonna have to squeak by, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, man. Let's jump into our next segment. So quarterback talk. Man, the quarterbacks are deep this year, bro. Deep. I did my top 10, and it was hard. And so I decided to make a top 20, and I was like, oh my God, bro, I still got honorable mentions that I could squeak by into these rankings. So, man, it's just the quarterbacks are so deep, especially in the Big 12. Maybe we could start there. How you feel about, the Big 12 quarterback play?
It is deep. It is so deep. Like, I was able to count at least like 8 proven guys that are really good. You got Noah Fafita at Arizona. Year 2 in that offense, I think he can take a step up. Sam Levitt led Arizona State to the college football playoff. Sawyer Robinson for Baylor was really good. Jalen Daniels for Kansas. I think he's a guy, he's been around forever. He's going to have a good year. Avery Johnson, kind of work in progress, but he's really talented. Rocco Becht from Iowa State. Baron Morton for Texas Tech. Josh Huber for TCU. And that's not even counting like some of these transfers that are really exciting for some of the other teams.
Yep.
This is looking like the best quarterback conference we've seen since the 2023 Pac-12.
It's loaded, man. It's loaded. Let's see. Did we mention any key names? I think you hit all the key names. Let's say Iowa State. BYU's quarterback.
Retzlaff, yeah. I think, we could see him take a step up. I think his play got kind of criticized late in the year. Part of that was because he was kind of dealing with an injury that wasn't talked about super much. But, man, I mean, you're looking at a conference that could surprisingly put 2 teams in the playoff.
Yeah.
I think the Big 12 just because of the quarterback play.
Yeah, and my co-host, Chris, he has a bold take that whoever wins the Big 12, whoever it is going to upset either an SEC or Big 10 team in the playoff. So that was one of the bold takes that he had on the season.
I love
Look,
that take.
yeah, looking at the quarterbacks, if I had to rank them in the Big 12, my number one Big 12 quarterback would be Levitt, and then Sawyer Robertson from Baylor, then Josh Hoover from TCU. I think those are my top three. But like I said, it's so deep. It's so deep, bro. You can make arguments for, they got Avery Johnson, Rocco Beck, the list just keeps going on and on. So
Right.
that's gonna, man, the quarterback play in the Big 12 is just so fun and loaded. It's gonna be nice to watch that.
It's going to be a must-watch conference, and both of these things. What I mentioned earlier about the 7 teams in the top 25 and returning production, and these quarterbacks, like those are two big things that Big 12 teams specifically need to have success, because they aren't going to get the recruiting classes that the SEC is going to get, but the way that the Big 12 can kind of get that big equalizer is experience and quarterback play, and there's a lot of teams that have both this year.
All right. What's some other quarterbacks maybe you want to discuss?
So I noticed NFL draft analysts are already high on Fernando Mendoza. So, this is my obligatory mention of him. He's got a lot of people in the Indiana offense. If we continue to put out some well-placed tweets, we can maybe get him in top 10 of mock drafts before the season even starts.
That is a name that has been circling for Indiana, right?
Yeah.
That is a name I've been hearing off a lot, and I'm curious. I haven't watched much of him. I forgot where he comes from, where he's transferring.
He came from Cal.
Cal, okay, yeah. And another name that's been circling is John Mateer from Washington State, I think, Oklahoma guy.
Yeah,
that's
Mateer's
another
Privateers.
That's another name I've been circling heavy. I did watch Mateer's film. Mateer, he actually impressed me a little bit on tape. I didn't watch too much film on the guy
Mendoza,
the Indiana cat. Yeah, I need to go watch him. But yeah, that is an interest. So the NFL draft, that's the take that he put out.
Yeah. I saw a draft analyst or two already starting to be like, what's a quarterback I can't wait to start to put in the tape and start watching? Fernando Mendoza. And I'm like, here we go. Here's the guy that we're going to, kind of take out of nowhere and turn into a top 10 pick before the season starts.
Man, if they go crazy again, Indiana, God, man, what a coaching job and just consistency. That's going to be really the key to watch for them.
What a story.
Yeah, what a story. You're right.
Because Indiana is sorry to interrupt there, but Indiana's dead last. They have the most losses in college football history.
Really?
Yeah. No joke.
Really? Wow. That I'm gonna have to clip that. Indiana, man. Well, they are a basketball school, I guess. I can see it historically, and they historically I can't remember, growing up. I never really remember them being great either. So that I can maybe see it.
Yeah. 2024 is far and away their best season of all time.
Yeah, I think the COVID year they had a pretty decent year too, maybe.
Yeah.
Then they have Michael Penix Jr. maybe.
Yeah, they were really good that year, and then kind of saw it tail off at the end because all of their players started getting COVID.
Yeah,
crazy times.
Man, do you have a top 5 or quarterbacks?
Oh man,
or
a
top 3 maybe?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Let's see your top 3. I need to go with proven guys. Let's see. Here. Let's hear your top 3 first of all.
My top 3 is Klubnik, Nuss, and Arch.
Ooh, nice.
And then I got Lagway at 4, and I got Drew Aller at 5.
I got Aller probably a little bit higher than you. I think I agree on Klubnik number 1. I got Aller number 2, and then I'm not willing to put Arch up there yet.
That's
You
fine.
know, I want to see him play first. That's the big thing with him. But you know, I think he can be number one. That's for sure. But let's see, number three. Yeah, number three would probably have to be. Oh, who did you just list?
I had Klubnik, Nuss, Arch, Lagway, Aller.
Oh yeah, Lagway was the one I wanted up there.
DJ Lagway. Yeah.
Yeah, although Nuss was pretty close too on my list. Sorry, I blinked on the name there for a moment, but
Yeah. Um, here's an interesting. I got the transfer from Tulane, Mensa. I think his last name is. He went to Duke.
yeah.
He's in my top 10.
Ooh, I like it,
He's
dude.
in He's a
He
dog,
was
man.
really good.
I'm high on him. So yeah, that's kind of like a bold take. Maybe I'm bullish on Mensa at Duke.
I think they are too. You know, like I mean, Malik Murphy was a talented quarterback. He did fine for Duke, and you know they kicked him out to get Mensa.
How you feel about Carson Beck going to Miami? How you feel about his talents?
He is about as mid as they come.
He didn't crack
I
me.
think
He's not in my top 10. Carson Beck.
no, not at all. Like he may honestly, we're talking about how deep quarterbacks are. He probably struggled to crack my top 25.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
he just I don't know. He just doesn't. You know, there's nothing about his skill set that truly impresses me.
I'm gonna,
And it's gonna be a tough year for Miami because you know they came from Cam Ward, who was a dog, to Beck. It's going to be curious to see because Beck at least has good receivers around him. You know, oddly enough, better receivers than what he had at Georgia, but at the same time, Miami's seeing a huge downgrade at quarterback. I feel like.
I'm not buying into Miami at all this year. I think they take a big step back. I got them finishing unranked.
Yep. Yeah, I'm with you on that take. I agree.
Okay. I got some other quarterbacks we could talk about. Lenora Sellers, South Carolina.
Ooh.
Big dual threat, hard to tackle, bro. This dude's a monster when he's on the ground. He needs to improve with his throwing. I felt like towards the end of the season he was making some strides slightly with the passing game. I think he's an up and coming big time QB for this season. I think he kind of broke out a little bit already, but I feel like he has pretty great chance to even hit some Heisman talk maybe.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. South Carolina is one of the more fascinating teams to me because, I feel like we sort of saw this before. You remember the year, what was it, 2022, 2023, when, they finished the year hot. They had that really random destruction in Tennessee, won at Clemson, with Spencer Rattler looking good. And then, they entered the next year and just stunk immediately. That's kind of where I get my pause about them. I'm like, okay, what's their offseason going to look like? Are they going to, was the ending a mirage, or is it for real this time? And, I'm a huge buyer, and that's kind of I feel like almost a pun. I'm a buyer in sellers, but yeah, dude, I love his running ability. That dude's a tank.
Oh, he's hard to tackle, bro. He's like a Cam Newton type body. Let's see. I got another one for you. Dylan Raiola. I think he's a really talented player. I think he kind of struggled slightly at times. Part of me questions the play calling in the offense last year. They do bring in
Holgorsen.
Yeah. I'm curious to see how he's going to change this offense for Raiola. I trust Raiola's talents. I think he needs to be coached up better and put in better situations. But Raiola's in my top 10. Some people don't see him as a top 10 quarterback. How do you feel about Dylan Raiola?
I can see it, and this is kind of something that we mentioned on our episode last week. My colleague mentioned that Raiola absolutely crushed it against man coverage last year, but his big problems was when defense went to zone. So that's going to be the big thing that he really needs to study this offseason. He was only a freshman last year, so he could get a lot better.
Same thing with Lagway struggled with zone too. That's where his picks came. If they could fix that zone coverage and get better decision making, you're right though. Like Lagway and Raiola, I think they got NFL arms. Like they could hit all the throws. They could hit the back shoulders. They could hit, past the numbers. I seen it on tape at times. So I think they good one-on-one beaters. They do need to improve with their zone coverages.
Yeah, and they were both young. They were both freshmen.
Right.
That'll come with time.
Both freshmen, and they both got NFL arms, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah. If those
Here's
guys learn to read zones, watch out.
You're right. Watch out, bro. Watch out. Another cat I want to talk about is Luke Altemeyer from Illinois. He's in my top 10. I may be a little higher on him than others, but he was really great with QBR, really great with efficiency, accuracy. He didn't turn over the ball much. I think maybe he can take a little bit more risk at times. I'm curious to see what you think about Altemeyer.
Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, I'm glad you gave him the shout on that one because, yeah, Luke Altmaier is a dog for sure.
Yes.
I really and I like the growth he's had too. This is year 3 with him in Illinois now,
Mm-hmm.
and his first year was kind of iffy. He had some good moments, but didn't quite go great. But then last year he really took off. He played great. Now this year the test for him is he's got another year in the system. Going to continue growing. But what does he do with those top receivers gone? That's going to be the big question for him.
And I want to say they just lost one of their running backs to the portal in the late spring.
So they lost him like super late.
That concerns me.
Where did that running back go? I just realized that.
Where did he go?
I know. I need to look at that. Yeah. That spring portal. There's 10,000 guys in the portal. It's hard to keep up with who all went where.
To the people watching in the lobby, man, if you know where that Illinois running back, I think Josh McCray, maybe his name was.
That might be it. Now you're gonna have me.
But yeah. So they don't have returning top wide receiver production coming back, and they just lost one of their 2 headed backs. That's kind of slightly concerning a little bit for the offense. They are my dark horse pick for the Big Ten. Another quarterback.
That's a good pick. And I got the answer. Georgia.
Yeah. He went to Georgia.
Grabbed him. Yeah.
Wow. That's a huge pickup.
Yeah, what a little quiet pickup there. Like, Kirby doesn't use the portal a whole lot. He just snuck in there and grabbed the guy.
Program. All right, here's another quarterback for you. Ready?
Yeah.
Haynes King, Georgia Tech, dual threat. I think whenever he was healthy and played, they might have went like 7-2 or 7-1 or something like that. It was a pretty impressive stat whenever he was healthy and he started and played. But what you think about Haynes King? He don't crack my top 10, but he is in like my 10 to 20 range.
Dude, he is such a gritty player. I love watching him so much. Like, he's not a guy that really seems to have like much of an NFL future just because, I think he's a little bit limited in the passing game. But, he's a guy who, the team needs him to run for 20, 25 times against Georgia. He's going to dive head first and freaking do it. That's what I love most about him. His running ability is what sets him apart. And that's why, the injury kind of weighed Georgia Tech down a little bit. But even then, like, you saw how gritty he was, not to keep overusing that word, against Miami. When he helped them take down the Hurricanes. He was not healthy in that game and still helped them come out with the win.
Here's a big name. Kevin Jennings, SMU.
Yeah, so Jennings was one that I was definitely thinking about a lot because he was really good throughout the year. He has one main flaw, though, and that is turnovers. And I feel like he's been removed from a lot of lists and gotten a lot of flack this offseason because of that. Because, when most of the nation took a while to notice SMU, and when they did start watching them was in the ACC championship against Clemson, and then that college football playoff game against Penn State. He had his 2 worst games of the year then. He just, he kept turning the ball over. But man, he's got a great arm. He is a fantastic runner. And, he's one of the reasons why, I still feel good about SMU. Maybe not enough to put in the playoff like we mentioned earlier, but he is really good. How do you feel about him?
Man, that playoff game against Penn State was atrocious. I have him. I guess I'm still high on him. However, I have him as my 18th best quarterback in the nation. Um, but I can't. You're right though. Although that was a really bad game against Penn State, and I feel like he knows where he needs to work on things. Hopefully, this offseason he really got in the lab and went to work. We could see a more improved version of him. I think he does have a good ceiling to his gameplay. I'm still kind of high on him, but I for some reason that sour memory against Penn State in the playoffs just keeps on wrapping around my mind. So if he could get fix the decision making and the turnovers, he's going to be a really great player.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just one of those things where, like, recency bias, especially, like, that's the last time we saw him out there. It was an ugly game.
I still got him in my top 20 though, so I'm not overly down on him too much. All right, another quarterback, Dante Moore, Oregon. He sat last year, maybe I don't know if it was 2 years, but definitely last year behind Dylan Gabriel, and he learned the ropes. He's coming in with a lot of weapons around him. Oregon got some weapons, man. I feel like
Yeah.
if you bad in that offense, you a bad quarterback. But now he is a little. I don't know how tall Dante Moore is. I'm curious. I don't. Well, Dylan Gabriel wasn't tall. Dylan Gabriel was fine, but Dante Moore, I'm kind of bullish on him, maybe because of the Oregon weapons and offense. I think he's going to explode this year. I got Oregon going 10-2, even with the inexperience from Moore. I know he did get that 1 year at UCLA, but I think he's going to be prime to take off this year and explode.
Yeah. And he showed me enough at UCLA to show that, like, he has the tools. He didn't have the greatest supporting cast there. The team was only okay. He showed me enough that makes me think, at Oregon, he could be. And it was a very interesting move by him because he was the unquestioned starter. He hit the portal and was like, you know what, I'm gonna wait my turn here 1 year behind Gabriel, and then I'm gonna be, I wouldn't be surprised to see him in the top 5 of the Heisman standings at the end of the year.
I wouldn't be surprised because of all the weapons he has around him. I think he's going to be statistical. So statistically, I think he's just going to be lighting it up. Okay,
Oh
let's see.
yeah.
Taylon Green, Arkansas. He don't crack my top 20. Now, I've seen some people have him in like the top 15, top 12 range. To me, I I liked his talent at times. I felt like he was a little too 50-50 with his passing game a little bit. But he is a warrior though. He does fight, and he's good on the ground with his legs. How you feel about Taylor Green from Arkansas?
Before I dive into Taylor Green, can we just take a second to talk about the fact that Bobby Petrino is Arkansas's offensive coordinator? Like, after everything that went down there, they brought that guy back. They
You know what's
got him
crazy?
back, and no one's talking about it.
And they were top 10 in total offense. But part of me is questions that they were always playing from behind and having to light it up like playing from behind for offense wise. And they went
Honestly,
off.
like,
But Petrino might end up being the interim head coach. If Pittman gets fired, crazy that
oh,
be.
can you imagine what a wild, strange trip that will be? Their
Petrino
offense.
head coach, boy.
Oh man, their offense was so weird last year because, like, not all of it was behind. Like, they were racking up the yardage and just were not. They were doing all the work, moving up and down the field, and just not getting the points to show for it. It was a very
Right.
funny.
Yeah.
It's almost like like if you cook spinach, like you start out, looks like a lot of it, and then by the end of it you have none. Like, that was Arkansas's offense last year. So for Taylor Green, then I think the next, I agree with your assessment of him. The next step is you've got to make those plays in the tighter moments. When you're in scoring territory in the opponent's side of the field, he's got to get more consistent and make those plays happen, get the ball over the line. Because, I mean, I guess, the yardage they put up there kind of goes to show that maybe there's a little bit of potential in this offense. Maybe Sam Pittman, maybe we can avoid the Bobby Petrino interim coach scenario.
All right, let's finish out with one more quarterback, and we can wrap it up. Well, let's do two more quarterbacks. All right, Miller Moss, Louisville, transfer from USC. He's not in my top 20. I feel like he was in my 20 to 30 range, but I felt like at times he impressed, but then he also got ran away from that. I can't. It's hard for me to pronounce that current guy's last name, but he pushed him off. I think he ran Miller Moss out the program. It could have been coaching and a bad relationship with Riley, maybe go south towards the end of the season. But at times he played well. I mean, at times he showed me he had a good arm. I think he needs to get coached up a little bit better. And he's with a good coach now at Louisville. What you think about Miller Moss?
Yeah, well, for one, time is a flat circle because, Miller Moss first burst onto the scene against Louisville and Jeff Brom. So clearly they liked what they saw by him that day.
Yeah.
So it's very funny that he ended up now back at Louisville. And, I do agree. I think Miller Moss kind of needs to show us a little bit, but at the same time, like, Jeff Brom is a quarterback wizard. They got great play out of, what was it? I almost said Jake Plummer, but he's the Arizona State guy from way back in the day.
Yeah.
Jack Plummer, like, he made him look decent. Last year, he turned Tyler Shough, a guy who wasn't even on the radar, into the second quarterback gone in the draft. Or sorry, third quarterback. I forgot out Jackson Dart for a moment there. But, so what is he going to do with Miller Moss? I think Miller Moss could have a big year. I actually really like him in that Louisville offense. I think, Clemson's going to make the ACC title game. I think it's going to be Louisville or Georgia Tech that ends up playing them for the ACC championship.
My co-host has Georgia Tech making it. And I feel like, me personally, I think Louisville is going to be the dark. Well, I don't know. I don't know if you would consider them the dark horse, and if then that's just in that scenario. Do you think
they're top 25 now? So I don't think they're a dark horse anymore. They're straight up a contender.
Yeah, I do agree with that analysis, though. I see those three teams kind of battling it out. Let's see. Last quarterback we could wrap up and close up on the show. Ty Simpson, Alabama. We haven't seen really a lick of this cat, but you got Alabama making the playoff too. So what you think about Ty Simpson?
This is blind optimism in Kalen DeBoer. I think he can get the best out of most quarterbacks. It didn't quite work for Milroe last year, but in general, I think he knows quarterbacks. He did not take a quarterback from the portal, which I think is a big key. I think that goes to show that he has confidence in him. And if he has confidence in him, so do I. What about you?
I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical a little bit. It is Alabama, like Georgia. It is Alabama and Georgia. Got the talent every other position. I'm skeptical in Ty Simpson and Stockton.
Hey, at least with Ty Simpson.
Yeah.
At least with Ty Simpson, close his eyes, throw the ball to Ryan Williams.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's down there somewhere.
Yeah. They used to have a meme with Joe Burrow or something like that. It was like, fuck it, Jamar Chase is down and throw it. But hey, we're gonna close up on that. We were hitting roughly an hour. We appreciate you so much for coming to talk sports. As always, you're more than welcome to any time to come talk, and can't wait for the season. And it's gonna be a hell of a year, hell of a season for us coming up. And just keep on pushing that content. And as always, bro, you got a friend over here.
Yeah, absolutely. Love coming on and talking ball. Would love to be on here anytime.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too.